Now, the recent passage of 4 state creation bills through their second reading in the Nigerian House of Representatives has reignited a long-standing debate on the restructuring of the country's federal system. Now, with proposals for the creation of Okeogun, Olu, Etiti and Tiga states are now advancing the legislative process. And the question of whether Nigeria is on the brink of a political and administrative expansion has become more pressing. Now, while supporters argue that the new states will bring and promote regional development, better governance and equitable resource distribution, others are saying that it is not what is needed in Nigeria at this point in time, given the economic situation, given the level of poverty, given the level of insecurity and administrative deficits we see in the country. It is not what we need at this point in time. Now, it's okay for two truths to exist in a country or in a space. It's very fine for two truths to exist. But at some point, one has to supersede the other for certain reasons. But we'll be discussing all of that and we'll be diving deeper into that conversation this morning with Armsfree Ajanaku, Executive Director, Grassroots Center for Rights and Civic Orientation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, state creation. What's your take on it?
Yes, I think the first thing I think about is the pre-independence period, where there was the Willings Commission, where there were the fears of minorities, and minorities said the only way we can feel safe and we can feel included is for the government at the time, the colonial government, to create new states. So the states will be like our own spaces where the majority ethnic groups will not dominate the minority ethnic groups. And one of the overarching recommendations or outcomes of the Willings report, Sir Robert Willings report, was that the creation of new states will lead to the creation of new minorities. And that is the reality that we have seen how many decades after independence. That subsequently we created more states. General Yakubu Gowon created more states. General Murtala Mohammed also did the same to Babangida, to Abacha, and all of that. They created more states. But has that laid to rest the agitations for the creation of new states? The answer is a resounding no. Because state creation essentially is about people clamoring for inclusion in governance. So if governance was inclusive in the first place, there would not be that much of clamor for new states. So I would say that all the states that have passed second reading now is a fundamental question of creation of new states resulting in creation of new minorities, because there would definitely be imbalances as a result of the creation of the states. If you look at the 6 geopolitical zones currently today, there are some geopolitical zones that have more states than other geopolitical zones. So if you create new states without even having that in mind, you are also going to further the imbalance, and it's continuing to, it will be a vicious circle. But the much more important question is, will these new states deliver good governance?
Now, that is a question a lot of Nigerians have asked, deliverance of good governance. What would you say guarantees good governance? And why do you think that this new state, people are saying it wouldn't. We're already not seeing good governance not being delivered at the level that it is already. But we see we had a caller who called from Niger State who said, this state is too big for a governor to handle and we need more states. In reality, there are states that need to be divided into 2 for good governance, better representation, for people to feel the impact of governance. Do you see that happening with the kind of politicians and political will we have to play and representation we have in Nigeria today? Do you see that as a reason, especially knowing that we're already not seeing or enjoying the good governance out there already?
Yes, in some of the cases where people are clamoring for state creation, I cannot fault them in terms of the fact that there are some parts of the country who feel they've been forgotten. There are some who feel there's injustice in the way the structure of the state is created. So if they agitate for state creation and they look at that from the point of view of inclusion, then no one would have a quarrel with that. But when you look at the Nigerian experience and the way subnational governance has gone on, especially since the advent of our democratic dispensation in 1999, we would all agree that governance, even in states that are not too big, even in states that are, you can say you can even trek across the states, governance is not coming. And if governance is not coming, even in in the states we have created, then we need to come to terms with the fact that state creation is not the problem, but inclusive governance. And to your question about whether these states are, can deliver a good governance, would ask the question: are the ones currently in existence, the 36 states, are they delivering good governance? The answer is no, they are not. And that is because the structure required to deliver good governance in terms of the participation of the people, the rule of law in a democratic dispensation, the role of the political parties in advancing governance, all of those things are clearly missing. And once those issues are clearly missing, that you've not gotten the structure right, then you can create 100 states. It will still be the same problem. Even in the US, where President Trump is saying he wants to annex Canada as the 51st state of the US, maybe he's doing that because there is an extent to which the state functions, the legislature functions. There's independence of the different arms of the government. It's not like in Nigeria where a political gladiator can pocket a House of Assembly. So if that's the model of states you want to create, then I'm sorry, this is not what we need as Nigerians. Even though I will not totally throw away the clamor. For instance, there is the original inhabitants in the FCT whose lands were taken over to give us a capital. Now, when other states are voting in a governorship elections, they are not part of those who are voting. So that means you have disenfranchised them. You have even made them stateless in their own ancestral homelands. So if people like that clamor for state creation, you can say, yes, it's justified. But if the clamor is just for the political elites to have access to power and have access to national resources, then I'm sorry, this is not the model for development we need.
Now let's talk about economic viability. Given the current structure, we have glaringly existing financial struggles of states, seeing how states depend on federal allocations for survival, seeing how poor IGR is being taken up by state governors, where states who we know have the capability and ability to generate internal revenue for themselves are lacking due to the lackadaisical attitude and non-political will of the governments. Now, say this pulls through, how can there be a new structure that would enhance financial stability of this new state? Is it possible to see a financial stability of this new state, see that you have leaders who are willing to generate internal revenue in their state? The economic viability of this, what do you see play out?
Thank you for this in-depth and very excellent analysis you have given in posing the question. I think you and I know the motivation for this, for the creation of most of the states, including the ones you listed.
Yeah.
The motivation is not a question of people saying, okay, we are coming forward. This is what we want to contribute to the federal pool. The motivation is about, there's federal allocation to be shared, and we believe it's our own turn to now start accessing federal allocation. And so that is the overarching motivation driving most, I'm not saying all, most of the states. And of course, you will not blame the people who are like, okay, everybody's on the gravy train. So how do we also get on the gravy train? Because if you ask yourself, looking at the current states, how many of them generate quality internal revenue to now say, okay, they want to fix things like education, healthcare? How many of them actually have that capacity?
I would even give healthcare and education a long shot. Roads.
Exactly. So the point for me is that argument about viability, or that discussion about viability, doesn't arise when the motivation is not for the state to be viable. You can talk about viability if the people who are proposing this state are coming out and saying our states would be able to generate 100 billion naira a month. In fact, if we cannot generate that, don't give us any federal allocation. Have you heard any of them say that? That is not the motivation. The motivation is that, oil money is still flowing. Money from other resources, VAT, It's still flowing. We need our own share of it. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be a vicious circle. But I must also make one point, which is the fact that the whole discussion about state creation is, for me, except in a few cases, is a confusing agenda, an agenda to confuse the Nigerian people away from the bigger question of the restructuring of the Nigerian Federation. The question is, what is the overarching philosophy? Because, you know, the military just gave us a constitution. They just, you know, dumped it on us and left the scene, allowing us to grapple with the contradictions. But the question, the fundamental issue remains, what is that glue? What is the basis of that union that we call Nigeria? We must think through that process. If we don't go through that process of thinking, I mean, every country is like a brand. It's like you're trying to manufacture a car. You understand? What is our foundation? What are the bolts? What are the nuts of our country? What is our position on how we educate the next generation? What's our position as a country on healthcare? Yes, the 1999 Constitution has what it calls the fundamental objectives and and directive principles of state policy. But because we have not negotiated that as a people, you understand? It is just mere words in the Constitution. It is not having a life of its own. It's not having an impact that it should have on society. What should be the relationship between state and society? What's the role of the ethnic groups? There are many questions that remain unanswered. And until we're able to negotiate our union as Nigerians, negotiate justice, negotiate even things like gender inclusion,
sure,
we would not be able to answer the key questions of development, and we'll continue to move about in a circle. So issues like state creation and all of that, they are just you living leprosy and trying to cure some more minor diseases.
All right. I'm glad you raised that point of it being a distraction, because thinking about it critically, one question that came to mind is state creation is a very cumbersome process. We know. Seeing that the last time it happened was way back in 1996, and we know how cumbersome it is, needing 2/3 of the National Assembly to vote on it, public opinion. So many things are going to be put in place. Do you even see the 10th Assembly with how they are, and lots of ruckus that has been happening, lots of things that have been coming out, showing the kind of people we have there? Do you actually see them going through with this, or it's just a mere political talk that is being used to distract or pass time?
Yes, so because the interest of political elites is more predominant in this whole discussion, there's nothing that can't happen now. This is not a National Assembly you can look at. In fact, Nigeria is not in ordinary times. These are extraordinary times. This is not a National Assembly you look at and say anything is impossible. Because in the same National Assembly now, there's discussion about converting the 57 LCDAs in Lagos, the local area development, development areas, which were created by President Tinubu when he was governor of Lagos. There's a discussion around converting them to full local government, which maybe is not something bad, but the moment you do that, the question is, how do you also balance it out for the rest of Nigerians? So what I'm saying in essence is that what is driving conversations like this is not the overarching interest of the Nigerian people. You can see that the process of consultation that you require for you to even think of something like this has not even gone ahead. The process of saying that the people matter, and so let's get their voices. Let's even you can even decide to put a referendum to the people. Do you want new states created? Which are these new states do you want created? So the question of representation is being abused and hijacked to foist certain agenda on the people. And this is what exactly is happening. And that's why we say that the current democracy is a minority democracy. It's not a democracy that is driven by the interest of the people. If you go on the streets right now and you ask the average Nigerian, what do you want to see government do? I doubt if state creation would be what you hear from them. They will more likely talk about the social and economic conditions that the government should face squarely.
All right, given that now, As a nation, I would say with over 250 ethnic groups and languages and religion and culture, when we first started, you made mention of the fact that with state creation, more minority would be created. But do you see this state creation, do you see it considering certain ethnic groups and culture and regional divisions? Do you see it addressing those regional divisions that are critical? Because we see groups coming out and say they're being marginalized, like you mentioned earlier. But would this give a certain level of, succor? For example, the Ishekiris wanting a Warri state to be created, the Ogojas wanting an Ogoja state to be created for themselves. I'm sure there are other local government within the villages in Ogoja that will say, oh, we are bigger, so we should have a little state to ourselves. But do you see this solving that certain level of division that we are facing in Nigeria due to ethnic groups and, he's from my place, he's not from my place?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It cannot solve those divisions. In fact, it will create more divisions, because what that would essentially do is to incentivize agitation. So 5 years, 10 years down the line, you are going to have new minorities. And I think Sir Robert Willings was right on point where he made that statement that creation of new states will lead to creation of new minorities. Because don't forget that in every ethnic group, there are sub ethnicities.
Sure.
Even if you take the Yorubas, as a big ethnic group, for example, there are the Jebus, and I think the Jebu state is one of the states. Very soon, you hear, different, other sub ethnicities, or they will always say there are also distinct ethnicities. They will also come up. So when you use the gravy train approach to talk about national restructuring.
What is the gravy train?
Gravy train is like you have stew, and there's a lot of fish in it, and there's a lot of just like food to be eaten. So everybody's talking about being part of eating of the national cake, and nobody's talking about how to bake the cake. So that whole gravy train mindset, like let's join it, let's be a part of it, it will always lead to new agitations.
Okay.
So the way you solve this is to have inclusive governance. And to have inclusive governance is not rocket science.
All right, let's touch on that inclusive governance. I'm glad you've taken us there, because that was going to be my next line of questions. Local government autonomy, local government governance, grassroots governance. We know how important it is. They've spoken a lot about ungoverned spaces in Nigeria, saying that they do exist and there are a lot. And there was a time we had an analyst who made mention of a local government in, I believe he said Kaduna or thereabout, where it is surrounded by lots of insecurity and banditry happening, but that local government is safe because of how active the local government is, and the government and governance is to the people. And some people have the point of view that if we actually do strengthen local governance in Nigeria, leaving people feeling more on the local level, it might, I'm feeling more represented at the local level, it might just end the clamor for state divisions by those big states who actually need them. Where do you stand on that?
Absolutely. I am in that WhatsApp group, if I can use that.
Okay.
I actually believe strongly in that. And in fact, our organization, the Grassroots Center for Rights and Civic Orientation, was founded because of that need to push for quality governance at the local level. Absolutely. In looking at our democracy, one of the biggest failings of our democracy is the fact that we disempowered the local governments. We did not allow democracy to thrive there. And because the nursery bed of democracy was not watered, it was not nurtured, then you did not really have Democrats emerging, and you did not have governance happening. And so that's why one of the major areas where I give credit to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, even though I'm a very fierce critic of his other policies, is the positive steps he took towards ensuring the whole process of autonomy in the local government begin. That landmark decision of the Supreme Court, which outlawed, lack of democratic processes at the local level, it's really a first step in the process to strengthening governance at that level. And if my local government can provide some of the basics. For example, roads. I have a good, road network. There are roads that local governments can handle.
Sure.
That, I don't have to see Tinubu for me to live a proper, life. And if local governments can invest in small power projects in some communities and they give access, people can do their business. You understand? What would somebody say he's waiting for? Yes, the president would always be important, but it will not be the person that every other Nigerian will want to put their problem at his doorstep. So that whole question of strengthening local government is fundamental. There can be no running away from it. So we may have all our top-heavy policies, politics, but as long as we refuse to do what is needed at the local government level, then we'll keep on having these agitations. And just in addition to what we've been talking about, don't also forget that currently you now have regional development commissions.
Yeah.
So in addition to the states, in addition to the local government, you now have regional development commissions. So if you are having regional development commissions where, in the case now, where the president has signed for South-South and signed for South-West, so you now have 6 regional development commissions. And those regional development commissions, they are supposed to also deliver certain, then you are creating more states. So it just shows that that whole dependency model is what is driving all of this conversation. And it is elite driven. It is not driven by the interest of the people of Nigeria. And when you have such elite driven narratives to create structures, what will happen is that the national treasury will be overburdened. The nation's resources would, all be devoted to you paying administrators and all of that. Right. And there will be little or nothing
for development. I'll get to the cost of governance, but I always had this image in my head, and I always imagine where the electoral process is so strengthened and fair, and you have a high-ranking professor of economics and governance being the local government chairman. Imagine the development at that state level, where a big mall can comfortably open up in a local government and push for development there, leaving little or nothing more for the state governors to handle, knowing that, okay, they're just overseeing and not pushing for development because the local government chairman are working extremely hard to develop their local government to the best and benefit of their people, curbing insecurity at that level. Imagine what governance at the federal level would be, at the representative level would be. It's actually going to be beautiful. Like you said, that is one part of governance that not just the government, but even Nigerians have overlooked for a long time, not seeing the importance of it. But now let's move to cost of governance. We've spoken several about how to cut cost of governance, boost internally generated revenue for states. That's why we saw the tax reform bill that happened where revenue distribution was being slashed. What I saw there was make your money and you will earn more from the federal government. And we saw how it was kicked against a whole lot. With the creation of states, obviously there's going to be a lot more allocations being given. So considering the existing high cost of governance in Nigeria, how do you see all of this, play out?
Yes, so of course that was, the point I was even already
headed towards.
Headed towards regional commissions, National Assembly, the judiciary, the presidency itself, the executive. You are going to have an escalation of the cost of governance. Not just an escalation of the cost of governance. You are also going to have a mismatch. The priorities of the elites who are now more interested in state capture, those priorities will override the priorities of the people. And you already seen it for all the time we've been, we returned to democracy since 1999. SUVs for officials is much more important than health care for the ordinary citizen. Cost of medical tourism for officials is given much more prominence than, education of the citizen. Forgetting that if those citizens are not educated, you are going to have a state of anomie, which is what Nigeria is currently in. So, of course, everybody knows that, this would escalate the cost of governance, where we are even saying de-escalate the cost of, reduce the cost of governance and channel resources. The proceeds, channel those resources to ensure that the people, you give them, a better life. But even beyond that, when you mention local government, that probably local government will fix so many things, and then maybe states have nothing to do, and all of that. Don't forget that we have millions of Nigerians living in rural areas where development has not even touched.
But they have local government chairmen.
They have local government chairmen. So at the end of the day, there will be no conflict. What will only have to happen is that there has to be a coordination of development efforts. That coordination would happen where you have sound minds. Some people can say, okay, this local government, your unique selling point, your point of advantage is agriculture. So we are going to support you to become the agricultural base of our state. Some other local governments, it may be that they have the acumen for IT. This is what the Chinese are doing.
All right. Let's start winding down. A lot could be said, but there's something I always say. I always say one of the clauses or one of the requirements we should include for political representatives, Senate, the House of Governors, everybody that's going for any political seat, one of the clauses we should add to it is, or requirement should be, please, the moment you get into political power, the primary health care in your local government should be your major health provider. You're not traveling out, you're not going to the FMCs, you're not going to go to your primary health care. That is where you get your medical attention. And the secondary school in your local government should be where your children should go to. If that is put in place, I'm pretty sure we'll see quite a difference. But at the end of the day, what is the solution? Because we still have, if we want to be honest, we still have communities who are marginalized. We still have people who are not feeling the impact of governance. We still have ungoverned spaces in Nigeria. What is the way forward beyond state creation? How can we make sure that everybody is being carried along to at least feel the little impact of governance?
So there is no one-size-fits-all solution to a complex problem. And I don't want to sit down here and pretend like, okay, we have all the answers. But can we set ourselves on the road to finding the answers? How much of data, how much of research governs our decision making? So like the National Assembly now that is even talking about state creation, did they even bother to do a survey of Nigerians? Did they even bother, even though they have an arm that is into research? So number one is that our decision making as a people has to now be driven by evidence, not just by whims and caprices of people in authority. They should always try to have that feedback loop. So if, for example, you go to the people, see like something like Brexit, the Britain, UK, they went to the people and asked them, do you want us to leave or not? And they decided to leave. So there's nobody that will come tomorrow and say, so that is what democratic decision making is about, inclusion of the people. But I would say that in all of this, the goal is not to agonize. The goal should not be to agonize endlessly. The goal should be to organize. And the people are going to play a critical role in that. And part of that is the electoral process. Because the leadership recruitment process, if you abandon it, then you cannot have the minds that will be in positions of power and authority to be able to drive the kind of restructuring we need as a country. So this is very, very fundamental. And of course, 2027 is around the corner. I urge Nigerians in all the local governments to also begin to think about ideas, people with the idea. Don't just talk, think about somebody because he just wants to go for a position for that, for that purpose. Think about people who are coming forward with the ideas and pitching them to you to push for the development of the country. And
at the same time, we would also, in addition to what he has said, we also urge Nigerians to, look for people who campaign based on issues that affect you, at the local government level. Let's start getting it right at that level and see what change it would make up to the federal level. Thank you so much, Armsfree Ajanaku, for joining us. It's been a very, very informative discussion this morning. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you.
In case you're just joining us, we're just having a conversation with Armsfree Ajanaku, the Executive Director, Grassroots Center for Rights and Civic Orientation, where we're talking about, the state creation, and we're asking, do we really need it? We looked at all the intricacies and things that come to play when it comes to that and its importance to Nigerians, Nigeria, and governance. I hope you've been able to pick out something from our conversation this morning. I hope you've been able to learn something, and I hope we've been able to keep you informed one way or another. Well, we've come to the end of this segment, so we're going on a quick break. When we get back, we'll be looking at stories that made it to the front pages of our dailies. Do stay.